Welcome back to another episode of the You Not Me podcast, where we teach you how to create amazing relationships and an unshakable mindset by living for others over yourself. In today's episode, Chris is going to talk about how your environment doesn't have to determine your effort. Your circumstances don't have to dictate your commitment, and you can choose to live with excellence regardless of any instability that you have around you. Common mindset today is that people say, well, if things were better, I'd give more effort, more commitment. I'd work with greater excellence. Some people might say, if I liked my job more, or if my teammates cared about me more, or if people appreciated me more, or if my spouse reciprocated my feelings more, then I'd be more committed. However, that's a mindset that creates a lot of problems when it comes to not only relationships, but also consistent effort, excellence, and achieving your full potential. So Chris, what's the problem with this kind of mindset as we dig into today's episode?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is you're then, if this is how you choose to live, you're constantly waiting on somebody else. And if you're waiting on somebody else to do something and then you're going to act, well, then if it never comes, you never act. So you just sit and you stay in the same place. And, as we talked about previously, the problem with, say, a creek and water that is sitting off to the side and not moving is it not only does it become obviously stagnant water, but it becomes diseased and actually is unhealthy. And so in our lives, if we're only waiting for other people, if we're always standing by and saying, well, when this happens, I'll do that, we just, not only do we waste minutes, but hours and days and weeks and then years. And next thing you know, you don't even realize how you got to where you are. But it's constantly because you're waiting on somebody else. And that's never a good way to live.
One of the key things about You Not Me is that you don't need perfect conditions from other people or from your environment to be able to give your best. You don't have to always say, well, someone else didn't love me perfectly, or someone else didn't care about me the way that I wanted to be cared about, or my boss didn't really give me the respect or the promotion or whatever it is that I thought that I deserved. Explain why You Not Me frees you up from other people, from their opinions, from their decisions, from how they care for you or don't care for you, and how it gives you the ability to rise above your environment and your circumstances.
Yeah, I think that the beauty of You Not Me and beauty of being in a perfect relationship with God is that you don't rely on the perfect circumstances because He's with you always. And B, you're not concerned with the outcome because the outcome is in His hands. And so sometimes we actually wait for the perfect circumstances because we're afraid to fail. And if we step out and do something and maybe it's not the right conditions, hey, I'm not going to play well or all the right market conditions for me to start a new company or whatever it is. And the biggest thing is if something is on your heart and you feel it's the right thing to do and it's going to help you and other people grow to become better, if you see that need out there in the world, then we need to step out in faith. We need to step out and do what it is that we feel like we're being called to do. We need to step out and do something that we see that is needed in the world to make the world better. And if we're constantly waiting on the right conditions, we're never going to do that. And as you and I have talked about, the best sailors, the best captains of a ship are the ones not that sit in the harbor and wait for the perfect conditions. They're the ones that have been out and tested by the sea, tested by the storms. And that's where, just so many times whether it's our kids, I see parents that when little kids are walking to the school bus, the parents are carrying the backpack for them. And it's like, well, guess what? If all you do is carry someone else's load for them, and if you wait, you're like, well, when they get older and they're stronger, then they can carry it. Well, no, give them the backpack now. Obviously, make sure the weight in the backpack is according to their size that they can actually handle it. You don't want about 60-pound pack on a 50-pound kid, but can you put 10 pounds in there? And whether it's going for a walk with your son or daughter or the books they're carrying to school, that's what's going to make them stronger a little and little and little, more over and over time. And so, again, if we're just constantly waiting for when I'm strong enough, then I'll go to the gym, or when I've cleaned up my life enough, well, then I'll go to church, or, well, when I get all these things in a row, set up in a row perfectly, well, then I'll start my company. No, just start now. And there are so many things, and there's a great book that you even referenced where it talks about the perfect photo, the test where they're being graded on one photo and that's it. And one group was said to take as many photos as possible and find the perfect shot from all of those things. And then the other group was trying to get just that one picture, just one picture. They couldn't take a bunch of them. They had to figure out what was the best one, and it paralyzed them because they kept thinking about like, well, this isn't right, or the lighting's not right. I need to move and do this. And then the people that actually just kept taking photo after photo and practicing and learning, and then they had so many to choose from. And and that's where I think, again, with You Not Me, with this, we're not perfect. I'm far from perfect, and this is far from, we talked about my janky setup here for this podcast. It's not professional, but guess what? We're trying to do something that is trying to help people see that if you choose others, if you choose service over yourself, if you choose to try to make a difference in the world and make the world better, that's more than enough, and let the outcome be what it is. So too often we worry about the fear of making a mistake, but also the perfect circumstances so that we can do it in an excellent way. And it's the best thing is just repetitions. It's just more and more doing it over and over again. That's how you get better.
Without a doubt. And I think that there's kind of a myth that people believe in where they think, well, when my circumstances do align, then I'll give my best and then I'll be able to, deliver or perform or whatever it might be. But the reality is like the effort that you give when your circumstances are actually against you or when the conditions are far from ideal, that's the effort that allows you to perform when the occasion comes, when the chips are down. For an athlete, they might say, well, if my coach really gave me the self-confidence or the confidence that I feel like I need, if he really believed in me, then I would give my best. But since he doesn't believe in me, then what's the point? But you don't know if the guy in front of you will be injured next week. Like, you don't know if your coach will just randomly change his mind. Like, you and I have both coached, and we know that like sometimes like one player just starts to perform and you really like them. And then before you know it, you're like, this guy's one of my favorites. But if you don't give effort when the circumstances aren't going your way or when the conditions aren't ideal, you're not going to be prepared for when you need to give effort when they are ideal. So I think a general principle for people, and it's been said many times before, is that you don't rise to the occasion, but you fall to the level of your standards. If you have standards that are conditional on what your circumstances are or whatever situation you find yourself in, well, then they're not really standards at all. Why might that be an issue for someone who has an ambitious goal, whether it's rising in the workplace and being an effective leader, whether it's building relationships at home with kids and with spouse, whether that's earning a starting spot as an athlete? What are the issues with standards that are just subjective?
I think, one of the things that I've always said to you, there's a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And it's really good in the idea of what it's trying to do, which is saying, if you understand it correctly, which is don't sweat the small things that happen. Don't get stressed or worried about those if things don't go your way or whatever. But what my fear is when people read don't sweat the small stuff, that means like don't worry about doing the little things right or doing their little things well. And that goes back to standard. If I am not trying to, whether it's prepare, if I'm not trying to do all the little things well, those little things add up to become a major, deficit that in whatever it is that I'm trying to do. And even if it's marriage, if I'm not trying to serve my wife with excellence in everything that I do, not just in providing income or cutting the grass or whatever it is it like, can I find the little things where, I can do the laundry or I can, help with paying the bills or whatever it is that maybe she and I have deemed our and my versus her responsibility that we kind of stay on top of. Can I do those little things where I see a need and I can do it for her that then frees her up to, whether it's to be able to relax or do something else that's on her plate. But those are all standards. Those are all me trying to say, how can I look around me and what are even the little things that I can do? This is going to sound a little gross. I was at I had to stop and get gas on the way to somewhere for work the other day. And I went in and used the bathroom in a gas station. And as I was using the bathroom, I looked down and there's a little piece of gum in the corner and literally right next to the toilet was a trash can. So it's like, okay, could you not just put it in the trash can? Why would you put it in the corner? Like, that's just laziness. That's just not caring. And it goes back to like when people handle things that are not their own, they could care less how they treat it. I mean, again, don't ever buy a rental car, because somebody has dogged that thing like crazy because it's not their car. They don't care. I remember we had rental houses, cabins in the mountains, and we would have to replace mattresses every few years. And I'm like, how are we having to replace mattresses? And it's because people treat them like garbage. Like, they just jump on them like crazy. They would never do that with their own stuff. And it goes back to a standard. Do you treat other people's things as well, if not better, than your own things? And so the same thing, again, with You Not Me, when you show up to work, why are you working? Why are you doing something with excellence? If it's just because your boss has treated you well or the company's treating you well, what happens the days when things are hard? What happens when the days that your boss maybe isn't in a good mood or your company has treated you poorly? Can you instead work as if for the Lord and not unto men? And that is how we need to look at everything, is how can I look at everything that I do? And, this isn't also to be paralyzed to where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't do something with excellence. Or, my son would say, well, I can always study more. I can study 24 hours a day. So how much do I need to study? And no, there's a balance, right? There's a balance of working hard, but also resting. I mean, there's a reason for the Sabbath. There's a reason for us to be able to sleep every night, is we have to take some time to recharge. Otherwise, we destroy ourselves. And a good friend of yours and mine, he tried an experiment in college, and he tried to get as little sleep as possible and to see, could I function on 3 hours a night or 4 hours a night? And he, after a few weeks, blew up. And, it's not good to constantly be stressed, and those cortisol and all these things happening, these things inside our body, the inflammation and things that are causing us to then have autoimmune diseases. So it's that balance of how can I have a high standard to where when I put my hand to something, can I do it with excellence? Not because of what I'm going to get, not because of, how someone else is treating me, but because of the gifts that I've been given, how I know that I'm loved unconditionally, and I'm going to do things with excellence because it's glorifying. It's glorifying to the Lord. It's glorifying to the person I'm doing it for, whether it's a client, whether it's a teammate. And those are the things that truly are life-changing. Those are the things that truly shape an amazing life, because instead of waiting for the perfect circumstances, or instead of waiting for somebody to do something for you, you step out anyway. You step out in courage and boldness and strength to say, I'm going to make a difference, that whatever I do, I'm going to take it to this level and see where the chips may fall.
Yeah, I read a story recently about Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool. And when they were in their most successful years during their European campaigns and Champions League final and all this stuff, maybe like 4 years ago, Klopp was asked who made the biggest difference in those teams. And he named Adam Lallana, of all people. For people who don't know soccer very well, Liverpool is one of the biggest clubs in England and in Europe. Adam Lallana, he came maybe in the summer of 2015 or 16, somewhere around there, came from Southampton. At this point, he was one of the better players in his position in the league. He was often called into the English national team, was entering really the prime of his career. And the Liverpool move seemed like a no-brainer for everyone. He was a really attacking and creative and kind of like flair player with a unique profile. And Liverpool, being a club that wanted to attack and play exciting and exhilarating football, seemed like a perfect fit. If anyone knows a whole lot about Lallana's career, it didn't really pan out for him at Liverpool. And he didn't play that many minutes, especially compared to the role that he had at Southampton. And he obviously won a lot of trophies at Liverpool with the team, but he spent a lot of his time on the bench. And it came as such a shock that Klopp said that he was the most influential player. But he went on to explain that he said Adam Lallana was one of the most influential players on the training quality that I've ever had in my life. And Klopp has coached at many big clubs, coached at Dortmund, who also went to a Champions League final, has coached players with extremely high standards. But he said that they would always play the day before the match, kind of like a simulated game where The starting team would just be in the red training kit, and the second team would be wearing yellow pennies, yellow bibs. And Lalana was basically in charge of helping the yellow team to mimic the tactics that the opponents would have the day before the game. And Klopp said that Lalana was so influential in this role that the matches were much easier for the starting group than the training session the day before the game. And Lalana faced a lot of injury problems as well in his career at Liverpool, and clearly was probably disappointed with his role, in all honesty, being an England international and being a big money signing, being in the peak of his career and spending most of it sitting on the bench or coming on as a substitute. But he didn't let that shake his effort. He didn't let that impact the influence that he would have on the group. And instead, he chose to rise above the circumstances and say, leadership isn't necessarily about my position that I have in the team as maybe a reserve player or a player with a more insignificant role. Instead, it's about what I can bring to this group, taking what I have, the giftings that I have. And even if I'm not getting what I want, even if my body is kind of failing me, even if the coach isn't giving me the minutes that I want, I'm not going to look at my situation and go, well, it's over for me. I'm going to look at, how can I be influential? How can I add meaning? How can I add value to where I'm at? So maybe if you could, Chris, just kind of riffing off the story, what are some ways that people can do this practically, whether it's with friendships where maybe there's, generosity that's not reciprocated or intent that's not reciprocated, whether it's in a marriage, whether it's with a child where maybe the child doesn't quite understand the parent's affection and love for them and it isn't really reciprocated, or maybe it's a similar situation to what Lalana was in, where an athlete isn't getting the playing time that they want. What are some practical ways that people can continue to give effort despite their circumstances and be able to be an influence where they are?
Yeah, I think back to just standards is really taking the time to identify who you are, how you want to walk forward in life, what you're aiming towards, and what are the standards you want to hold yourself to. If we're just constantly saying, well, when this happens, then I'll hold myself to a high standard because someone finally gave me a chance. Or if you look at marriages, marriages will inevitably end in a divorce if neither person cares about the other person. If it's only trying to get your own needs met, nobody's going to perfectly fulfill you. My wife is a testament to that. She knows that I do not perfectly fulfill her all the time, but my heart is to always try to do that. And though yet I fall short, how can I find ways to make sure that I'm doing all that I can so she knows that my heart is pure? And the same thing goes through, for your teammates on, whether it's a sporting team, whether it's your teammates at work, and whether it's your kids. Do they know that you are for them? Do they know that you have a pure heart and that, you use the word significance? Maybe Adam Lallana didn't seem significant in the minutes that he played in games, but he was significant in preparing his teammates to help them be successful and to reach amazing heights and to win. And so it just goes back to, okay, where am I right now? Where are my feet planted? I can't, even though I want to be here somewhere else, I wish I was in a different circumstance. Well, if I'm waiting to get to that place, it may never come. Or my lack of having a standard and giving my best where my feet are planted is actually going to prevent me and block me from getting to the place because I don't give my best. And so everything that we do, if we realize, I was actually talking to a good friend of mine who's a professional MMA fighter, and just some struggles and trials he's going through. And what we can always do is step back and look at what matters most. And if we remember what matters most, it is that we give our best every day so that we rest our head at night knowing that we've done a good day's work and we've taken the opportunities that have been put in front of us and we've maximized them. And anytime, there are times, it's funny, you can look at even small little things that I think I sent you something the other day about the poor people habits, right? And it's like when you leave a room, a poor person's habit is they make sure they turn the light switch off because they don't want to waste a few cents on leaving a light on in a room that they're not in anymore, or turning the water off, or all these little things where it seems like it doesn't add up, but over time it does. And one of the quotes that I really like is talking about trust, is it's gained in drops, but it's lost in buckets. And I can't do one thing for you and then all of a sudden have this huge amount of trust. Like little bit over little bit, consistently me showing up in a way that truly cares about you is what builds that huge, amazing amount of trust. If I only do it once in a while and when things are great and when I'm happy, look, I mean, there are athletes that are amazing athletes and they seem like these unbelievable leaders when they're winning. But what happens when they lose? What happens when the pressure comes on? And maybe, again, we all have bad days, and that's okay. I mean, the post you put up the other day about Roger Federer is awesome. I mean, the fact that he has won over 80% of his matches, but he's only won like 54 or 56% of the points he's ever played. That's an amazing just mentality to think about. Like, that's a guy that's one of the most successful tennis players ever. And when it comes to points, what you're playing, he's only won a little over half, like barely over half, but yet that turned into 80% wins in matches. So how can we add that to our life and how we view what we do? Can we show up and say, every little thing is a point that's building towards that game, set, match, right? And so making sure that the little things we do, I mean, even just taking care of your car, if you don't check your tire pressure in your car every so often, and then you start running on low tire, you're going to have a flat, you're going to have a blowout, hopefully not on the highway where you have a major wreck. And so the thing is how can we find those little things to where we can make a difference and we can be a significant person and have a significant impact on someone else's life. And whether that's being there for your son or daughter, saying, hey, I know I have something at work that needs to be done, but it doesn't have to be done this minute, and they need me right now, so I'm going to break away, help them, or spend some time with them while I have them at home. And I'll get to that work this afternoon or this evening when I can make up. But right now, I have the opportunity to be present in my child's life. And I promise you, there's nothing more significant than that. I truly believe our first ministry is to our family. And too many people waste the time when they could be with their kids, and instead they choose something that is less impactful. And not only is it less impactful in the short term, but even generationally, the long term. Your son or daughter will without a doubt remember whether you were there for them or not when they were a kid. They don't care how big your house is. They don't care how nice the car is you drive. They don't care how much money you have in your bank. What they care about is the time that you give. And is it unconditional love to where you're just happy to be with them, not because they're successful at a sport or they're getting great grades, or that people say what an amazing child you have because of how well they speak or anything else. None of that matters to them. They just want to know my mom or my dad loves me, and there's nothing that can change that. When that happens, when somebody has that wind at their back, that power, that empowerment to say, like, even when I fall short, even when I make a mistake, because you're going to, I am loved, I am part of a family, and I can always turn and go back to my family. No matter what's happening, my family will always be there for me. That is what creates a child that has confidence and security in this life, that doesn't have to strive, that doesn't have to, show all these stupid things on Instagram and TikTok to try to get more people to think well of them, because those are only a flash in the pan. And as fickle people, the world is fickle. The biggest thing is the people that know you, do they love you deeply no matter what you do, no matter how many times you fall short? And so that's where it goes back to the little things. If we can truly, like Adam and Lana, is even when we're not in the spotlight, even when we're not getting what we want, all those little things behind closed doors or when people aren't watching prepares you for when the big thing comes. And if you haven't done it, when that big day comes, you're going to fall short.
Yeah, that's a great summary. And I think that it's such a powerful analogy of these small drops adding up to something big. If you don't have all those small drops that go before the moment that comes that's decisive, well, you're not going to have anything to show for it. And I think that it's also just, especially relationally, when you're in a difficult relationship, whether it's, again, marriage, kid, friend, that continual reinforcing of trust and I'm here for you. I care about you. I'm devoted to you. I'm serving you. You never know. It's like that analogy of like the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's like that one extra bit of straw, and it's like, boom. I saw a thing actually the other day. It was hilarious. These kids had a watermelon, and like, obviously, if you take a watermelon and throw it on the ground, you can break it. But they were trying to find a breaking point of how many rubber bands they could put around a watermelon until it burst. So it's the same thing. It's like you put enough or enough rubber bands around the watermelon, eventually the tension's going to be so high that it explodes. And like, they were like super taken aback and they were like, whoa, it was an awesome video. But if you just think of one rubber band, you're like, well, that doesn't make a difference. Like that doesn't matter. Like my effort today to, show up for my kid when he doesn't really care about me or doesn't seem that interested in me. Yeah, it might seem insignificant, but those inputs over time add up. You put that one, hey, let's go outside and do this. Like maybe he says no. Maybe your son says no. Or, maybe you invite him to go do something that he's really interested in. If it's like reading a book or like, I don't know, building something with Legos or something like, hey, let's go play with the Legos. Maybe he says no, maybe he says yes. But the fact that you showed an interest and made a genuine effort over time, that compounds and that builds up to then, well, if I hadn't done all of that work before, it's not going to show. So it's such an important reminder that you bring up. I saw something the other week as well that said ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. And I think that it's speaking to this fact that just because you have people around you that maybe aren't the best influence or aren't giving you what you want, or maybe the circumstances aren't ideal, that doesn't necessarily sink you. It doesn't put you into a place of despair. What puts you into a place of despair is when you allow those things to affect you, when you allow them to kind of get into your heart and really discourage you and put you into a place of, well, it doesn't really matter, where you completely lose hope.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that quote about it's the water that gets in. I've seen this with my own boys, going to college, and it's one of the best things you can do is find your people. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that not people are bad, but when you look at just friendships and people that you're around on a regular basis. I mean, there's the old saying, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And it's true, but at the same time, you have to let those friends, what they're doing, get inside of you. And you can be friends with people that maybe aren't the wisest yet, or haven't come from good families and had the same upbringing as you, or are foolish. But the question that you have to ask yourself is, am I going to follow in their footsteps? And am I going to let that get into me? Because the biggest thing that we can do to protect our future is back to having a standard and saying, I'm not going to allow my standard to drop because of the people around me. I'm not going to let that stagnant water get into me and disease my heart to where then I start doing the same bad thing. So I think, again, it's so well said. I mean, there are so many things around us. Again, trials, storms, people, poor leadership in the workplace, poor coaching. We've seen in college sports that it's become more like a job and more like a pro game than it is actually truly trying to develop amazing people. And student athletes, it's more about, you're an athlete, and if you can help me win, you're important to me. But if you can't help me win, whether you're injured, whether maybe you're not as good as we thought you were going to be yet, or whatever, we're not even going to give you a chance. We're going to toss you aside and bring somebody else in that's better than you. And it's like, well, what happened to the actual commitment to each other to step in and say, you're a part of this team? And then some coaches or leaders say, you're a part of this family. Well, how do you treat them? Do you really treat them like family? Do you toss them aside? Like, I don't get rid of my son because he got a C or a D. I love him anyway. And we say, like, okay, how can we get better so that we don't do this again next time? And so that's where I think it is so important that we have a standard and we don't allow things to get in. We don't let that water get in to sink us. Because if we are strong we know who we're living for, why we're living, and what we're walking towards, we can prevent the ship from even sinking.
Yeah, so you need to have a foundation to stand on. Um, you need to have something that keeps you grounded when the storm hits, that keeps you from being shaken, keeps you from falling into despair or hopelessness or just thinking that it doesn't even matter. Um, so there's three you not me principles, Chris, that we've come up with that can anchor you when you're in the storm. First, these being purpose over position, the second, service over self, and the third, standards over situations. You can kind of run through these one by one and just kind of elaborate on each of them and maybe give some action steps for people to apply so that they can anchor themselves in the midst of whatever storm they're in.
Yeah, I mean, and purpose over position, it's interesting. Some people say, well, I don't have any power to affect culture. I don't have any power to make changes. I don't have any power to, to do XYZ that needs to be done. And the biggest thing is, okay, well, maybe you don't right now, but with the position that you have, where your feet are, how can you love and serve the people around you? But also, how can you problem solve? How can you look at from a corporation standpoint? What's affecting your area, and can you figure out how to do the best in your area to then help another area be more successful? My oldest son is doing an internship right now in marketing, and what he's seeing is that maybe he doesn't love marketing, but what I told him is that marketing, maybe that's not the direction you want to go, which is great that you've learned that, and maybe you want to be more of a relationship manager, business development, etc. But you understanding how the marketing works and what those people are thinking when they do stuff helps. So then the next time that you're in a different role, you can say, well, I understand what they're thinking and why they're doing this. So stop getting angry because you think what they're doing is wrong. Instead, they're trying to help us. And then how can we actually complement each other versus just two different silos working, thinking that each one is doing the right thing, but actually it's causing this friction. And instead, maybe you're not the CEO, but you can do something to help bring people together with how you treat them, with how you actually listen and understand, and maybe bring that back to your team that is all frustrated and say like, hey, this is why they're doing it. And we can have an impact where we are. And the biggest thing is, I know you played against Diego Luna, and looking at his rise from USL to MLS to now, in the Gold Cup, I mean, he was unbelievably impactful, not only to lead with the way he worked hard, with the way he was dogged in his defense, the way he scored goals, but he lifted people up around him. And if he, a couple years ago, playing in the USL, only showed up, when he's like, oh, I'll give my best when I'm in MLS, or I'll give my best when I'm wearing the crest of the U.S. national team. He said, look, this is where I am. I'm going to do everything I can to grow and get better. And it's amazing to see, whether it's someone in the workplace that comes into, say a bank with just a low-level job, and then within a few years, they're doing all sorts of amazing things now to help lead and drive that company forward. But it's because they took what they had, they not only cared deeply about it, the purpose of what they were doing and what they were going towards and who they were living for was more important than the position that they had. And making sure they did everything with excellence to help all those other people do amazing things that gets recognized. Whether it's coaches recognizing someone's just unbelievable effort all the time, or someone, leadership in the workplace saying like, I really like that person because my gosh, everything they do, every task, every project we give them, it's done with excellence, it's done on time, or maybe even done early. And like that person can handle more. So let's move them up the chain. And I want them over more projects because we need more people doing that kind of work.
Yeah, I think two good summary points is just, if you're thinking about purpose over position, don't wait to be seen to give your best. And remember that your impact isn't limited to your role. If you want to go ahead and dive into service over self now.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great summary of what You Not Me is about. It's about service over self. And if we can really live that out, if every person in this world said, hey, I'm going to look and try to serve people around me, not just myself. That doesn't mean that you can't benefit as well. If they do that, my goodness, the amazing impact we could have on this world and on this life and on the relationships that we have. And it all goes back to the greatest example of service over self, which is Christ on the cross. He said, even though these people reject me, even though they don't understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing this, but I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it to bring you together. I'm doing it to do something you could never do for yourself. And that's what service over self is. It's looking at the needs that other people have, whether they voice them or not. If you picking up and asking a question, hey, are you struggling with this? Hey, are you okay? Like your work isn't as good as it normally is, and saying like, hey, that's serving, is me caring deeply about you and trying to help you find a way to become your best, or to help you say as a parent, how do I provide all the things my kids need to be successful versus them going without. And sometimes them going without is maybe a good thing in the fact that they have to find a way, they have to be creative. But if I don't serve other people over getting my own needs met, my marriage will fail. If I am only worried about getting my needs met, whatever I want, my marriage is going to fail, because my wife is going to get frustrated because all I do is take instead of trying to give. And that's what a perfect relationship does, is both parties care deeply about each other to where they're willing to sacrifice and serve for the other person versus just themselves. And there are times in a marriage, there are times at work, there are times on a sports team that not everything's going to go perfectly, and maybe for a while. So can you have the endurance and the perseverance to keep serving and to keep loving and caring even when you don't get anything in return? And that's what happens, unfortunately, whether it's in Hollywood, we see those more often than not, but they don't last because they say, I'm not getting my needs met. We couldn't come to a good solution or whatever. And it's like, well, but you have kids involved, and those kids are watching how you treat each other. And what sets up a child to be an amazing spouse is them watching the person of their same gender, how they treat the opposite person. And I think the biggest thing that we can do is make the choice to always focus on how can we contribute to that person's life versus just focusing on how we get treated. If it's always, well, I'll give them, in return to whatever they give to me in like manner, it's going to be terrible. And some people have never seen it lived well, and that's why they don't serve well. But it takes one person to step out and say, even though you're not doing it to me, I'm going to do it to you. I'm going to care deeply. I'm going to love you. I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to have grace. And eventually that person will do the same thing in kind. And like I've seen it with my own marriage. I mean, that's kind of how You Not Me was birthed, is that my wife and I, we had a good marriage, and then we went through hard times with the real estate, crisis and financial issues and everything else. And so I just decided, you know what? I just want to love my wife as best as I can. I want to make sure she feels cared, valued, and see how I can take things off of her plate. And I didn't ever say a word to her about this, but she started doing the same thing in return. And I've seen it with another friend of mine that when I first spoke about You Not Me, he's like, man, I love this. This is great. And unfortunately, he was divorced, and he and his ex-wife, they had a lot of, issues. And so when he started living out You Not Me to her, because he thought this was such a thing he'd never heard before, he was very much into stoicism and everything else. He started doing it, and then she started doing it back. And he said, man, I can't thank you enough, because even though my wife and I aren't married, and I don't think there's a chance we'll get back together, but we have the most amicable and amiable relationship now that it makes it so much better for my 3 boys. And people don't even realize that we're divorced. They think, my gosh, someone said to them, you get along better than most married couples. And again, it just goes back to when someone is caring deeply about the other, over time, we see this and we want to do the same back. And that's not why we do it. You have a pure heart because you just really want to care about the person, but it's just this truth in life that when you care deeply about somebody else, over time, they will care deeply about you, and then that leads to an amazing relationship.
Yeah, you mentioned the example of Christ. I often think about the start of Hebrews 12 when it says that for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame. I'm paraphrasing poorly, but he already had every reward. He already had the full glories and treasures of heaven. He was exalted with the Father and the Spirit. He wasn't lacking anything. And what was that joy that was set before him? Well, that was his church that he would save. So he wasn't necessarily standing to personally gain anything. Yes, was he exalted? Yeah, but he wasn't, it's not like he didn't have that before. So he wasn't looking at, oh, what kind of rewards might I get if I, sacrifice, if I serve? No, he was doing it just to do it for the sake of the other people and for the sake of those that he would save. So I think that if we're giving a couple reminders, it's just, focus on how you can contribute, not necessarily on, whether or not the other person's reciprocating it or maybe how well or poorly they're treating you. The second one is just remember to look around and look for the needs around you. You mentioned great thing if you're married, just to like look for small ways that you can take stuff off of your spouse's plate. Maybe that frees them up to go work out or go for a walk or just relax, get away from the kids for, 30 minutes. And over time, that makes a huge change, not only in the marriage, but as you said, like obviously in the lives of your kids and the lives of those around you. So if you want to get into the last one, standards over situations, and then we'll bring this to a close.
Yeah, again, it goes back to, I mean, if you think about anything that you're doing in life, if you don't have a standard as to how you want to perform, like there's, I've talked about one of those, it's a cassette tape I used to listen to back in the late 90s with my first job, and it was called The Strangest Secret, by a guy named Earl Nightingale. It was recorded like in the 50s. And he said that one of the biggest problems is people simply don't think. And I remember hearing that. I was like, that's really interesting. And this goes back to standards. If we don't think about what our standard is, we don't have a standard. It's just based on emotions. It's based on how we feel that day. There are plenty of days that I go into the gym and I'm exhausted, and it's instead of doing it early in the morning, it's 5 or 6 o'clock at night because I haven't had time. I didn't have time in the morning. Work was crazy, and so I don't really feel like being in there, but do I have a standard of how I show up and work out? And, we talk about how it's great to have, friends that you go do it with because they help you hold yourself to a standard, but also when you're by yourself, can you hold yourself to a standard? Who we are, our character is what we do behind closed doors when nobody's watching. And it goes back to standards. Do we have standards of what we watch, what our eyes and our brains see? Because some of that can actually be a detriment to our marriage, to the relationship with our significant other. So those standards that we set, we have to think about what is it, who am I, what do I want to be, and then to make sure that we live it out. Because if we allow our standard to change based on the circumstances, like there are people that show up to work and they're a totally different person than they are at home, and vice versa. Some people might be awesome at work, terrible at home. Some people might be awesome at home, terrible at work. And why would you want to be anything other than consistent? Because then people have no idea what to expect from you. And it goes back to your standards, is the standards of the language that I use, the standards of how I treat people, whether they're the CEO of my company or they're the person that, that empties out the trash cans. Is there a difference? And if there is, why? Do you think that people are worth less than you because they don't make as much money or they don't have a super technical, unbelievably smart role? Or do you see everybody as being created in an amazing way that have unbelievable gifts? And guess what? They're the son or daughter of somebody else, or they are married and have kids of their own that value them deeply. So for you to treat them any other way than valuable is a terrible way to live. And it goes back to why would you not be consistent and treat everybody amazing? Like the story when we talk about going in line to Chipotle or any restaurant that you order food. Why would you treat somebody badly just because they're there serving you? Why not make their day better? There was a time I was in a restaurant with my son, and I had to step in and say something because the person ahead of me was cussing out the person that was serving them because they weren't happy that they weren't going to give them extra something for free, and they were trying to be manipulative and everything else. And I just finally had to say, can you please stop talking to the person that way? And we had to deal with, with some things, and we had to work through some scenarios with that. It took a little more than just that one question, but why would you do that? But also the thing is like then every time I went to that restaurant afterwards, they remembered that I cared enough about them to step up and say something because I saw that they had value. I saw that they mattered, and I wouldn't let somebody treat somebody else poorly just because. And I think, again, just going back to the standards we set as far as how are we going to live our lives? What is the truth that we base it upon? And can I carry those consistently into every aspect of my life? And I think when you do that, it's a fun way to live. You don't have to stress and think about, okay, well, I'm in this situation now, how do I act? It's just your standard. It's just who you are, and people love to see you show up because you care deeply about them. You're going to give your all. You're going to do everything with excellence, and you're going to have character and integrity. They don't have to worry about, do I trust this person or not? No, it's like, this person, I know them, and I love them because they love me.
That's great. Yeah, I think people can just remember, don't let your standards shift with the seasons, and set your bar high. Like, set a high standard for yourself, but season that standard with the salt of grace for yourself for when you fall short and for others who are trying to live up to that. But if you do this, you're going to be able to live above whatever life throws at you. Just to wrap up and land the plane here now, a helpful reflection question, I think, as people go into upcoming week and they want to apply this. Where are you letting your environment lower your standards? How are your circumstances affecting your effort? And then maybe one more would be, who around you in your life needs you to be like an Adam Lalana right now? Maybe you don't have the ideal marriage. Maybe you don't have the ideal parent to child relationship. Maybe you are in an identical Adam Lalana situation where you're not getting the playing time that you deserve. So who needs you to be that kind of person for them today? Chris, thanks so much for the conversation today, for all of the principles and the shared wisdom. To the listeners, we hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. If you appreciate this content, feel free to leave us a review, and we look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Have a great day.